Good morning. That simultaneous breath as to who's going to welcome everybody this morning. But good morning and welcome to the Money Monday on the Daily Huddle. We've got some exciting things to talk to you about today, and we're just excited to be here. I love seeing the faces and putting on the right attitude to get started with the Daily Huddle on Mondays. But before we get started, we are going to talk today about what we need to know about student loans or planning for college. I wondered if we could tell when we know we've been in college too long. This hits home with me, really. When my parents are running out of money.
It's time to go. Good morning, everybody. I'm Kimberly. This is Zach. We are your host, your co-host today for the Daily Huddle. So welcome and thank you for joining us today. I think Zach just mentioned it, but I'll say it again. Today, we're going to talk about what should I know about saving for college. That's a big question for a lot of people. So, but before we do, we're going to get started with our Daily Huddle questions. So, Zach O, you want to ask a few of them?
Sure. I see Stan. Stan, can you answer our first question for us? What time is it and what are you grateful for today?
It is not Stan's time yet.
It's okay.
Stan, are you
all right? Chase, what about you? What time is it and what are you grateful for today?
Grand day. The time is now. And you know what? I'm grateful for both of you today. I really like you guys. I'm so happy you're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
That was sweet, Chase.
All right. Sorrel, where are you and who will you hug today?
I am, let me see. Oh my God, I'm right here. I'm right here and I'm going to hug my son today.
Oh, awesome. It looks like Stan's here.
All right, Stan, how are you? You get question number 3.
I'm grateful because I am the way I say that I am.
That is it. And we start these days like this in the morning for that reason. So we can all say that we are in a good place and we can be around good people. So welcome again, everyone. Thank you for being here. I hope that we can bring some value to you guys this morning. And if you have questions, we will have some time for that at the end. If you're on the Zoom screen, you can feel free to raise your hand throughout this conversation if it's the time to do that, so that we can go ahead and address it as we go. So some things to think about. Again, we're going to talk about what should I know about saving for college.
Well, I think it's funny. Like I posted this on my little Facebook story, just inviting people to join us this morning and watch live from Facebook. And one of the first things I said, and then you can talk, is we have 4 daughters. One is finished with college, one is in college, 2 are on their way. And we've been teaching about money for 20 years now. So these are conversations that we've had for a long time, both personally with ourselves and with our family, and then professionally with our clients. It's always when we sit down with families, it's always their top 2, 3, 4 goals. If you ask them, the top things they want to accomplish, always paying for their kids' college is close to the top. So with that being said, now you say that.
Well, I think that we talk to people and we found that as parents, if you're dealing with, now if you're my parents were both public school educators and didn't have this knowledge going through early on. So I ended up paying my way and working my own way through college, and borrowed money to do that. Got jobs, extra jobs, those kind of things. So we know that there are a lot of people out there that and how to pay for college if you're paying for it yourself is a whole different conversation, right? So we can extend this if we have feedback that you want to do that and have those kind of a conversation. So and there's a big group that applies to, because pretty much if you don't start planning for your children's college to be paid for separately of your retirement planning early on, like on their first birthday, then the conversation becomes really difficult around age 13, 14, 15. When you say, wow, my kids are going to high school, now I'm going to need to pay for their college. What can I do now? And unless you're independently wealthy or you find a new source of income, your income's mostly spoken for at that point in time. You're covering all the things that you need on a daily basis. So time horizon is one of the biggest things that you've got to consider when saving for your children's or your grandchildren's school. So time horizon means, how long do I have? How long can I let these investments work? And how much can I put into those investments? So those questions you have to ask. And then obviously, where do they want to go to school? How much is that going to cost? You can find any institution, right? And we know from experience, like Kimberly mentioned, that the schools that your kids say they want to go to when they're 12, 13, 14 years old are not necessarily the ones that they will end up going to. But as with any plan, having a target and knowing about what that cost will be is very important. So you can go to any institution and find the average cost of attendance. And a lot of them even break it down on how much families whose income is this and this, between these two, how much they should expect to pay. So there's a lot more information out there than there used to be. I know that. And so we can tailor those kind of plans specifically for that school and that child based on their age. But a lot of times, what we start with is, if you want to save for your kids' or your kids' education, the first question I have is, are you set with your retirement?
I think that's probably the biggest piece, is people have all of these great goals and dreams to take care of their children because they want to, right? We're parents. We want to make sure our kids have the best in life and they have everything out there. But without saving for my retirement, if I stop what I'm doing so I can afford to save for college education, or if I lower what I'm doing so I can afford to save for college education, then at some point in time, I might be able to pay for my kids' college, but they're going to have to pay for my retirement. What do you think is cheaper for them? It's definitely cheaper to pay for their own college than my retirement. So my retirement, your retirement,
Yep.
your personal financial situation is most important when you're looking at, saving for your kids' college, paying for their kids' college. Make sure you're set financially. Make sure your retirement set. Make sure you can pay for yourself before you pay for your kids.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it on why do we want to pay for our children's college as a societal gut feeling, is that we need to plan for that at the top of the list, because we want to provide a opportunity, and we want to provide a smoother sailing for our kids. We want to make sure that certain obstacles they don't have to deal with. Well, dealing with impoverished parents that need somewhere to live or need some way to pay their bills is much more difficult, and there is no guaranteed financing. I know student loans are a touchy subject, and we can hit on that later, but if your child wants to go to school, they can borrow money to go to school, right? And so and you as a parent can help them by helping them qualify for those loans, those kind of things. But you can't just borrow money to retire off of. You can't just well, I need to retire now, so where does that money come from? So that's the biggest, I think, eye-opening statement that we make to a lot of our clients is, I know that you want to save for your kids' college, but you have a shortfall in your retirement savings already. So we needed to send money that way, right? And then work our way into that in the future. The next thing that I talk to people about a lot is, in those same assets, if you want to save for your kids' college, instead of doing a separate account that is pigeonholed, for educational expenses like a 529 plan, which they have good applications. And if you're not familiar with 529 plans, they're state government sponsored plans that give you a state tax deduction on your contributions. But you have to take the money out in the form of qualified educational expenses. So we can dive into that later too. But before you open an account like that, what I like to explain to people is just put that money into your retirement accounts, into your accounts that are not pigeonholed. Investment accounts, retirement accounts, whatever, something that doesn't have all of those rules and regulations attached to it like a 529 plan does, because kids are changing their minds. Some kids aren't going to college, right? They're doing other things.
Or they get a scholarship.
Or they get scholarships, those kind of things. But I also take it a step farther and I say, listen, if you can have your assets growing, I want to pay for my child's college, right? Let's say that's the case here. And instead of opening an account for my child, I'm going to keep assets in my name. I'm going to fund my accounts that I don't have to, I have different sets of rules, right? So at that point in time, when the child goes to school, then what are we going to do to pay for those? Well, we'll borrow money, right? It's tax favored rates, lower rates, and it's guaranteed loans that are deferred in payment until after graduation, until 6 months after graduation. In most cases, you don't have to make a payment on those. So while they're in school, they're borrowing money. They are borrowing money. Follow me here. And when they graduate and they put a diploma in my hand, I've given my assets another 4 or 5. I think the average time to finish an undergraduate degree now is 5 years. I've given my assets another 4 or 5 years to compound in their location. And I can, at that point in time, with degree in hand, right? Because I don't want to just pay for classes for my child. I want to pay for them to complete and have that degree finished. So when degree is in hand, I can either pay that off out of my accounts, or I can choose to make that payment for my child, whichever one I can do. In essence, still paying for their college, but making sure that there's completion. If they stop and say, you know what, Dad, you know what, Mom, I don't think I want to finish with this degree program, and I've been writing checks every single semester, or I've been, we don't really write checks anymore, but making transfers over to the college, then I'm just out that money and they don't really have a tool that they can use to better themselves. But if they stop halfway and they've borrowed the money, then I say, remember our deal. If you complete the mission, then I pay for it. If you stop short, those payments are something that you're responsible for. So I think that is the second biggest thing that our clients go, wow, that makes sense.
Because even if you tell parents not to pay for their college education to plan for their retirement, they're going to get mad at you and they're going to say, I hear what you're saying, but I'm paying for my kids' college. Sure. I don't care what you say, paying for their college. So that's a happy medium, right? For both of you to say, okay, fine, pay for their college, but put the money in your name, let it grow, give it 4 or 5 more years. And then you can lump sum pay it off. You can pay it with payments, whatever you choose to do, you can pay for their college, but at least your money is growing. I think a couple of big mistakes that people make is that, they put all these assets in their kids' names, so they have these big checking accounts, or these, obviously 529 is going to have to be in their name. So that's a different conversation. But outside of a 529 plan, they've got a lot of these assets in their kids' names. And if children have assets, it counts, what, 20%?
Yeah. So when you do the FAFSA, the federal financial aid form, where it determines expected family contribution. So we've lived this world with clients and also personally. So if you haven't done that, no matter which institution you go to, before you can apply or qualify for any kind of aid, whether it be grants or scholarships, you have to go through this process of filling out the FAFSA form. And in that, you answer all kinds of personal data questions about parental assets and about children's assets and all these other kind of things. And what they do ultimately is they determine what's called the EFC, which is the expected family contribution. And if your child has assets in their name, those have a 20% weight on that expected family contribution. And if the assets are in parental names or in your accounts, that drops all the way down to like a 5.6 factor in that equation. So
so don't put money in your kids' names.
Yeah, I mean, even if just off of that simple factor, having a stock account where you just buy assets for your children every year or whatever else, is not the best way to use for college planning, because it will be factored in a different way.
I think it's a good time to talk about what assets are counted against you, like what you're expected to use or expected to look at your family contribution, and what assets are outside of FAFSA. So obviously, if you're looking at, what do I qualify for? What am I going to have to pay? Anything that you have in a bank account or a brokerage account, any cash, a net worth of a business with over 100 full-time employees, real estate that is not your family's primary residence, qualified educational benefits like 529 plans, investment property, UGMA or UTMA accounts, which are children's accounts for which your parents are the owner, stock options, bonds, and CDs all count against you when looking at your, your expected family contribution. How much am I going to have to pay for my kids to go to college? Can I really afford this? And the assets that don't count against you, which I think is really important to hear when we say this, is your family's primary residence. They can't, even if you don't own anything for the house that you live in, they can't say all that equity as an asset that you should pay for a kid's college. It doesn't count against you. Life insurance doesn't count against you. So if you have cash value in your life insurance, which you guys should be listening to me loud and clear, especially if you have little kids, so you have time to allow that to compound and grow. If you have cash value in a life insurance policy, it does not count against you. They cannot do anything with the cash value in your life insurance policy. Annuities. If you have money in an annuity, it cannot count against you in your FAFSA, which is a big deal. And also your retirement plans, your 401ks, things like that, those don't count against you. Now, if you are taking distributions from your 401ks or putting in contributions or things like that, then that's going to count against you, but not the actual lump sum that's inside your account. So all of those different pieces are just important to understand when you're planning for kids' college. What are your choices? What are your options? How can you pay for it? What's your strategy? What's your thought process? If you believe us and say, don't pay for your kids' college, fund your retirement first, and that's all you can afford to do, awesome, because that's your most important priority to yourself and your children, period. But if you don't, then at least allow your money 5 more years to compound, but also search out the vehicles that are necessary for you or important for you to use that aren't going to count against you when they're looking at how much you can set aside or how much you can afford. Colleges, especially private colleges, they have money. Right? They have money that they can give you in grants. They have money they can give you in loans, not loans, but grants and scholarships and things like that. Public colleges, not as much, but private colleges, they do. So the more demonstrated your need is, right? The more they have the ability, if they want your kid, to help you figure out a way to get them there. So just remember that when you're structuring your assets, when you're looking at everything. I know you want to give your kids money, right? I know you want your kids to have this big fat account with their stocks and all this kind of stuff, but don't, because it's going to hurt them financially down the road.
Yeah, and one of the things we've told all of our kids, and they're aware of this, is that we will pay for their a good state education will be what we're on the hook for.
Actually, and you can clarify in a second, we've actually always told our kids to order like they're paying.
Right. Well, true. Plan like you're paying. So
we're like, order like you're paying, because this is your responsibility. And I think to this point, I mean, Emma, our oldest, just graduated. She's still in the 0% tax deferred student loan conversation. But she did really well, and she had tons of scholarships and doesn't have much debt anyway. But it's still an order like you're paying conversation. Our other daughter, McKenna, she's at Skidmore in New York, and she's got significant grants for her to go there as a crew athlete. But order like you're paying.
Yeah, and that was the conversation basically, is that scholarships are important, and scholarships are something that are totally in the control of the student. And so we look at every behavior, right, as to what can we do to increase the behavior, the positive behavior that we want. And so if you're talking about completing that degree program and saying, I'll pay for it when you finish, you can also use carrots like, I will match scholarship dollars that you get dollar for dollar over and above a certain amount. So they know that they got to go out and find those lists of scholarships. Thousands of scholarships every year go unclaimed. because people don't apply for them. They just don't know about them or whatever else.
But if
So-
they think it's their responsibility, they take it more seriously because they think, oh, I really am going to have to pay for this. They choose based on, I remember Emma looking at cost of colleges and she's like, I'm going to South Carolina. I get the same degree, the same education, and it's cheaper and I got to pay for it. Okay, that's where you'll go. She loved it. She did great. She just took the MCAT last week. She wants to go to med school. Like, she's fine, but she chose it. Really, that was a big factor in her decision making because she knew she was going to have to pay for college. So I think it's important to give your kids that responsibility, whether you actually make them pay for college or not. I think it's important for them to know they have skin in the game, because if they don't, then it's like Zack said, some of them, not all of them, will take a few classes and they're like, oh, it's not for me, or I'll go back later, or right.
I know my grades were much better. And I said I paid for my school. My parents paid my first 2 years, and I decided I was going to take some time off. And they said, well, just know this, if you don't finish, when you go back, we're not paying. And I didn't believe them. I thought they would pay anyway. But when I went back, they didn't pay. And my grades were better. My focus was better, all those kind of things, because it was up to me and it was my decision to be there and those kind of things. So from a planning perspective, the things to know about saving for college is start early and know your time horizon. Know your retirement is structured first and make that your number one priority. And let this be part of, obviously not your 1 or 2 year olds planning situation, but if you have kids that are rolling into high school and you're really worried about this planning scenario, bring them into the conversation and let them know they have a role in the affordability of their schools. And I have had good friends, fraternity brothers, that were in admissions at different private schools, and they said, we will never let money stand between a kid that wants to be here, that fits our bill, and them being here. They have assets, they have money. This is private schools. Public schools are very limited. So, have your kids look wider. Don't look at that price tag online and say, wow, this is 3 times as much as a public institution is. But you might pay half of what you would have paid at a public institution based on the fit of the student. So learn more. There's so much more in this avenue, but we want to open it up for some Q&A where we've got some time to do that. I see some chats down here.
I think it's just comments as we go.
So anybody have questions, any comments that you want to make, things that you heard that we said that you say, well, how does this work? Or things that that you want to add or have questions about what we've run into?
Well, as you're thinking of your questions, we can talk a little bit about 529s and
Okay.
the pros and cons. Cece, before we do that, let's go ahead and go to you first, and then we can talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the conversation. I wish I would have had this conversation when I was a young lady thinking about going to college. And now that I'm hearing the conversation, I'll be better able to have a conversation with my 12-year-old niece. And so I just want to thank you so much for being so generous to share this information, because I didn't have this information growing up. And so now, the future has a better opportunity. The generations and my niece, I have a better options with this information than I did. So thank you.
You're
You
very
are
welcome.
I think that's our goal and our mission, right? Whether it's the college education or what we do every day for a living, is teach people what we know and what we've already learned, because if not, they're going to have to stumble forward and, hit their head on the wall and do all the same mistakes. So it's kind of like raising kids. If you'll just listen, we don't know it all, but we probably know a little bit. So we love sharing with you guys and giving you our ideas and our thoughts. Any other questions or comments? So talk a little bit about 529s, and because I think that's the most popular college savings plan that most of us think about when we think about saving for our children. So talk about that a little bit, as far how it works. And
So a 529 plan, each state has, most states anyway, have a state sponsored 529 plan, which basically gives you tax credit on your state income tax for any dollars that you put into that account. So it's after tax dollars coming from, you don't get a tax break on the federal level. So it's after tax dollars on the federal level that you put into an account that accumulates tax-free and you can take distributions tax-free as long as those distributions are taken for qualified educational expenses.
And keep receipts.
Yeah, qualified educational expenses, tuition, books, fees.
Room and board.
Well, room and board, if it's institutional room and board, it's really difficult to document an apartment, even if it's in a college town. So there are things like that, living on campus that would pay for food and pay for all those kind of things. So there you can find the guidelines for the 529 plans and what to take withdrawals out for. Another thing that you can do with a 529 plan is if you have 3 kids, instead of having a 529 plan for each child, start a 529 plan for the oldest one and put all the money into that account. Because if they don't go to college or they don't use it all or they get a scholarship, you can roll that benefit down to the next child. And so whereas you can't, it's an easier planning tool, right? So it's more or less the family 529 plan instead of this one's for this child, this one's for this child, this one's for this child. Ultimately, if you try to do the same amount in each kid's account and the one's older than the other one, one's going to lose anyway. So just put it all in the top bucket and let it trickle down. One of the downsides to that is if they don't go to college or you don't use it all, there is a 10% penalty for plus taxes for withdrawing the growth on that account. So make sure that you're aware of that. As of 2024, there is a provision that will allow you to roll up to $35,000 out of a 529 plan into a Roth IRA, but you're still subject to the annual caps on how much you can put into the Roth IRA, which I think is like $6,500 at this point. So even though you could put $35,000 over there,
it's going to take you
several years to get it over there.
Yeah.
So know that the 529 plan, you're committing full on to higher educational expenses or penalties, one or the other. So I'm not saying it's bad. You can also use it for if you pay tuition in high school. $10,000 a year can come out of kindergarten through high school tuitions can come out of a 529 plan. So if you start one of these early for a 1-year-old child, and at the time they go to high school, you deem that they're going to go to a private institution, whatever you don't get met with scholarships or grants or whatever for that school, you can take up to $10,000 a year tax-free out of your 529 plan for those.
But I would tell you, if you're planning for a younger child, we're not a couple of years away and we're just trying to wash money for state income taxes or something like that. If you're starting out college planning and you're looking at a 529 plan or your best options for college funding, I would definitely look at life insurance as well. So reach out to us, reach out to a different financial advisor, whatever, but make sure that you at least educate yourself on the differences between 529, life insurance, how they work, what are the pros, what are the cons of both options. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And I think life insurance isn't talked about enough as a vehicle to fund your kids' college education. So just keep that in mind and think about that. Before we close out today, any other questions or any other conversations or any other comments that you guys want to share? You're so quiet today.
That's all right. It's all right. Well, if you know anybody that's going through this process, if that's not you specifically, feel free to reach out to us, and we can certainly help point them in the right direction, do that kind of thing. So, Sorrel, I saw you unmuted. You want to add something?
No, I wanted you to know I'm here, attentive, not alone.
Oh, it's good. You never know when you're talking if you're interaction or not. So I'm glad that I know you guys are here and you're listening. I know that it's a Monday morning, and sometimes the subject matter is pertinent to you and sometimes it's not. And we just want to make sure we bring a wide array of lessons, because there are people out there that aren't just here on screen that may have an opportunity to grab this stuff. So like I said, we're here. This is what we do every day. So if people have questions, reach out. If you have somebody that you know that's dealing with this, shoot them in our direction, and we'll be happy to use our own personal experiences with what we've done, but also with what we've done over the years with clients. So without any further ado, let's talk about the things we need to keep our mind focused on as we leave this morning. So our 8 tenets: number 1, love. Number 2, laugh out loud. Number 3, stress less. Number 4, eat mostly plant-based. Number 5, give. Number 6, sleep. Number 7, move. Move, move, move. And number 8, check yourself before you wreck yourself. We call that give yourself a pause. So, all right, guys. Well, good morning. Happy Monday. And let's go conquer the world.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
One
Excellent
love, guys.
job.
One love. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I heard some things today I never heard before. That was beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think we're frozen on the coffee cup.